Bro, this issue of Absolute Superman is incredible. Oh my God. Okay, let's just jump into this, right? So, what this does is this picks up in the aftermath of everybody learning about Krypton's destruction. And one of the cool things that Jason Aaron did here with Krypton's destruction is he established that, as we know, Jor-El and Lara, the parents of Superman on Krypton, that they were not part of the Science Guild. They were essentially Krypton's version of like coal miners, more or less. But they had figured out that Krypton was basically dying. It was getting ready to explode. They tried to inform the Science Council, and the Science Council wouldn't listen to them, only for them to find out the Science Council already knew, and they had been preparing evacuation ships for the ultra wealthy and the powerful. And so when they went to the Science Council to try to force reason, that Superman, as a teenager, had actually dumped the information basically on Krypton's version of the internet, and the whole world learned that the imminent destruction of Krypton was upon them. And so what it says is those days after the story broke were difficult ones, violent ones. After my entire family was sentenced to death by the Science League, Law Guild shock troops raided our home, forcing us to fight our way to safety. But there was no safe place left on Krypton, not for us and not for anyone, because it's this phenomenal circumstance, right? Like literally as they're bogarting their way out of this place, it said the world knew the truth that Krypton was breathing its last, and the Science League had known for months, but they'd hidden the truth while secretly enacting their own plans for escape. In the wake of this revelation, the planet began to explode in more ways than one. Now, here is a really important question that I'm going to ask you guys, because I want to know your thoughts on this in the comment section. Did Superman do the right thing? Like, morally, yes, you could argue that he did the right thing. He informed the planet's citizens of the planet's imminent destruction. But was it actually a good thing? Because what were they going to do? What could they do? Right? I mean, the planet's getting ready to blow up. Where are they going to go? Or did he needlessly set society on the path of panic and pandemonium in the pursuit of truth? Literally, he told people that the world was ending and there's no way for them to stop it, right? So again, it's really, really interesting when it gets to this, right? Because what he says is riots swept the Redlands along with rumors of massacres in the city. We could see the towers of Kandor burning in the distance, and all the while, the planet was coming apart beneath us. I don't know which was worse, how we Kryptonians had abused our homeworld so brutally, so heedlessly for so very long, or what we did to one another in our final shameful hours. And so it's wild because what you end up doing is you pick up with Lara and Jor-El when they're literally at what is essentially their home, right? Kind of a place that's modeled, or at least that the Fortress of Solitude is modeled after. And Lara's struggling here because in her mind, they can make space for just one more person. But really, Jor-El is the more sane person here out of the two of them because he's like, look, we've done everything we can, right? If we add any more people to this, if we make any more adjustments, we're going to compromise the ship's integrity and no one's going to get out of here. So I get your desire to help and I love you to death for that. But if we make any more adjustments, everyone's going to die. And it's just the reality of the situation. They just can't save everybody. And he's like, it'll have to be enough. And so in watching his parents coping with this, right, and literally the world exploding in front of his eyes, Superman's just kind of like, okay, like this world ended this way for a number of reasons, right? The citizens of it who were tearing it apart, so on and so forth. Whatever world we get to next, it will not follow this same fate. And so what you do is you switch over to the present day, right? Earth, Pakistan, the Peacemaker outpost. Now, one of the things to remember is that for those of you guys who are not familiar with Peacemaker, right, the character from DC Comics, that's Christopher Smith. But here in the Absolute Universe, the Peacemakers are more of like they're a peacekeeping force on paper. In reality, they're just a violent paramilitary force, is really all they are. But one of the things that had gone on is that Christopher Smith had shown instability, right? Now, Christopher Smith had actually requested to be taken out of the field, right? He's like, I don't need to be out there. Like, I'm a danger to myself. I'm a danger to the people around me because I am literally a guy who's losing my mind. But as we know, while we don't know a lot about Brainiac in the absolute universe, which is to say, is he the Brainiac that we know from DC, where he's like the alien that travels around the world, or really like the Machine? He travels around the universe and collects planets and so on and so forth, and is like, a 12th level intellect and a Superman foe. What we do know here in the absolute universe is that seemingly it is kind of like the AI this sort of controls the peacemakers, their directives, their orders, and so on and so forth. And so it was essentially the Brainiac AI that sent Christopher Smith back out into the field again. And then he snapped at the end of the last issue. Like these citizens were kind of laughing at him, and he just killed them all. Right. And so that's why you pick up here and it says, here he comes, hold your positions. And it's like, how are we supposed to stop something like him, something like Superman? What are we going to do here? Now, that's one of the things to remember. This is not your grandfather's Superman. He's not the guy who's older and experienced and wiser and more patient. Absolute Superman, dude, this kid is reckless and it's amazing because all these tanks are waiting for him to show up. This dude says, man, you better come strong. Dude, he takes those tanks out like that. And then you have like all these just peacemakers who are in this room. And it's like, report your status. Nobody's saying anything. And then it's just screams right on the outside as they're all literally just being destroyed. And so Superman says, there are 23 people dead in Orangutan, gunned down for the unforgivable crime of laughing at a man with a gun. And so like one of these guys is just like, get back, be ready to fire as soon as you see his face. That door explodes open and Superman's standing there looking like a man possessed, right? It's amazing. He says he isn't here, right? And then he asks his suit, right? Like, because Superman's suit is basically made of like technology. He's like, where is he, Saul? Right? And that's where Saul says, accessing the Lazarus database, Kal. Once again, I strongly advise against this. But Superman just screams out, he's like, find him, right? So it's like, it's nuts. This dude is so pissed. And so Saul says the Lazarus Core cyber defenses are of a sophistication beyond the planet's natural capabilities. Peacemaker Smith's whereabouts are heavily encrypted. Now, this is a huge indication of what's going on here. Because again, while we don't necessarily know a lot about Brainiac, what this indicates is that Brainiac is not from Earth, that in some capacity is the Brainiac that we know. He arrived here on Earth and has been here ever since. Hence the statement, it's beyond this planet's natural capabilities. So again, at that point, Superman just like grabs this guy, right? And he's just like, Christopher Smith, he murdered 23 innocent people. Tell me where he's hiding right now. And this dude is like a hair's breadth away from death, right? I mean, it's literally like, by the grace of God and an ounce of patience is this dude continuing to live. And Superman tells him that, dude, like, he becomes Gene Hackman from The Quick and the Dead. He's like, if you live to see the dawn, it's because I allow it. Dude, it's crazy. And so in that moment, he catches himself. Right? He brings himself down from like this fit of rage because this guy's like, please don't kill me. And Superman's so full of rage, the moment he stops, he realizes he's killed all these peacemakers. And there's just like this one guy who's left alive. And it's like, okay. Right? And so at that moment, Saul chimes back in and he says, I'm close to unraveling the encryption while also fending off a series of counterattacks. Someone called Brainiac is attempting to infiltrate my systems. And then he says, I found him. And where Superman asks, like, are you talking about Smith? The response of Saul is, no, Brainiac. He's at a research and development facility in the Nevada desert. The room is filled with miniaturized alien cities stored in bottles. Kal, there are people inside them, people who won't stop screaming. Brainiac wants to speak with you. He's offering Smith's whereabouts. We can find him at such and such location. But ultimately, Superman just takes off. And so at that point, you end up basically bouncing back to the Redlands. And what ends up happening is that once all these Kryptonians get onto the ship itself, that the ship starts to bond with them, right? Because again, it's made of a kind of living technology. The same suit basically that Superman has, which is a really ingenious way to function. Instead of having like all this space taken up with gears and with, oxygen tanks and tubes and stuff like that, the very ship itself allows you to survive. And so Superman and Krypto kind of take these small little moments, right? This small little moment, and they just sort of say goodbye, right, to the planet itself, right, to Krypton. And it's a very tender moment because it's like, I'm just saying goodbye. And he just asks the question, like, so what do you think the next planet will be like? And then the ground shatters under it and just like all this lava and everything starts pouring out all over the place. Superman starts to fall down into the fissure of this thing, right? Into the crack of this thing. And Krypto lunges to save him. And you guys know what's coming next. You guys know y'all know what's coming next, right? Krypto successfully saves him. Don't worry, guys. Krypto doesn't fall into the crack and die. So what happens after this? I had you guys going for a minute there. You guys thought Krypto was going to die. Don't worry. So did I. I thought Krypto was going to die. I was like, if Jason Aaron kills Krypto, we riot. We go to the next Comic-Con and we just stand with our arms crossed and frowns on our faces asking why he decided to kill Krypto. But what we do get is kind of everything that's going on with regards to the rest of Krypton. And it's cool, right? Because what happens is Superman says the clerics conspired for months to build enough ships to evacuate the Kryptonian elite from the dying planet. What could Krypton have accomplished in that time if the guild had allowed themselves to work together? More people would have been saved, no doubt. Maybe not all, but as it was, at least some, because not a single ship managed to take off that day. Not one of them, at least not from the cities. Now that's an important thing. And this is kind of why, in circling back, I asked the question, did Superman actually do a good thing by revealing the destruction of Krypton to the citizens? Because what usually happens in this kind of scenario, when you have mass panic, that logic and reason go out the window, right? When people are faced with their imminent demise, they will do whatever it takes to escape those demise, right? It's evolution, fight or flight. And while we do have sentience and we do have the ability to overcome our evolutionary drives, in those moments, we choose not to, and we give in to that evolutionary impulse to run. And so it's like walking into a crowded room and yelling fire, right? Watch how many of those rational people suddenly become irrational, breaking for the exits. And so what this means, and I'm not trying to be cynical here, I'm trying to make a point. What this means is that in this moment, when all these people in their panic and in their terror descend onto the escape ships that were created by the Science Guild, that it turns into complete pandemonium. The ships are overcrowded. There's way too many people in there. The ships can't take off. Violence takes place inside the ships. Somebody shoots a fuel tank and the whole thing explodes. It's one of these scenarios where mass panic leads to the destruction and the ruin of everyone. So that's why I asked the question, did Superman do a good thing? And it's not to say he should have just left them to their fate. Right? It's not to say he should have just been like, well, I mean, I could tell everybody, but mass panic's going to ensue. So I got my escape route. Hey, Krypton, sorry about your luck, right? And then just take off. Right? I mean, no, I'm not advocating that. I'm simply just asking, like, what would you have done instead? And so what he does is he kind of focuses back on the ship itself as it starts to take off. And what he says is that on board our ship, people were crying. Everyone was frightened. But the strangest thing happened to me once we took flight. I felt a profound calmness come over me, a confidence that I had never known. And that's where he walks over to this younger girl. He actually walks over to Kara and starts talking to her for a second, right? So yes, Supergirl exists in Absolute Superman. We've kind of known that for a little while. And he tells her, like, don't be scared, right? This is a great ship. It's the best ship that's ever flown. My mom and dad built it. Now, the other part of this is like, our survival hinges on this ship. So you better believe that mom and dad didn't skip corners when it came to this thing. But none of it matters anyway, because a giant chunk of kryptonite comes hurling to the ship and blows right through this thing. And like Superman is just sent flying along with a host of other Kryptonians. But what ends up happening is the suit comes out, right? A portion of the ship itself, and it manifests around Superman in the form of an escape pod. Now, it also does the same thing for Krypto. It does it for Krypto, right? Krypto is okay. Guys, I know you don't really care about what happens to anybody as long as the dog survives. And then it also gets around Lara and Jor-El, so they're saved. But as they're making their escape, there's this crazy scenario that unfolds. He says, for 10 billion years, the planet Krypton basked in the blistering red light of its sun. Toward the end of its existence, the planet had become riddled with parasites, tiny creatures infested Krypton's star-hardened skin, eviscerating the world one handful of guts at a time, until its insides became unstable, until its blackened lungs wheezed and gushed radioactive bile. For 10 billion years, my homeworld stubbornly endured, and it only took a few measly million for people to ruin it all. That will be the legacy of Krypton, that no matter the grandeur or the majesty, no matter the history or the power of science, no matter the depth of love, it can all go away. Every last speck of it. Because seemingly what happens here is that as all the ships, right, from the main ship itself, as all these escape pods are making their way, they're all caught in the explosion. Superman is the only one who makes it out. And that's where he's just like, can anyone hear me? Right? Mom, dad, anyone. But he's the only guy that makes it out. So it essentially looks like Krypto dies, but he dies off panel. So it makes it a little more bearable, but it's crushing. Jason Aaron, what's your deal, bro? I don't care what you do. Right, you can have Superman be tortured by Darkseid, right? You could have Lara and Jor-El just die in a fiery explosion, which is essentially what happened. You can do whatever you want to the characters in the story, but a rule of this universe: never go after the dogs. You never do that. It just doesn't happen. And so at that point, you have Superman, who again transitions, like literally flies to a different spot. This is kind of happening in the modern day. And Saul, his suit, asks him, like, I thought you wanted to go after Christopher Smith. And he says, forget Smith, right? I don't want to know where he's hiding, because if I know, I'm afraid. And at that point, Saul's like, are you afraid of like what I've learned about Brainiac? Like, I can promise you that fear is unwarranted. And the response of Superman is, no. I'm afraid that if I find him, if I get my hands on him, of what I'll do to him. Because I won't just beat him, right? I won't just pummel him. I will tear him apart. I'll rip his arms and legs off. I'll tear his jaw off his face. I will literally incinerate this guy. I will make the last few moments of his life the most harrowing experience he could ever endure. It's literally him terrified of his own rage. And so at that point, he's like, I need to ground myself, right? I need to be reminded, Saul. I need to be reminded why I'm here. I need to be reminded of home. And so at that point, he flies back to Smallville. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. I told you, man, it is so good. Oh my God. Absolute Superman is so incredible. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section, and I will catch you all later. Peace.